Welcome to the Assembly Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assemblymember Cole. Dickman. Edgeworth. Gonzalez. Hibbets. Howdigy. Miller. Monroe Moreno. Moore. Nadim. Chair Mosca.
I'm here, and Assemblymember Hadigi is here as well. Thank you. Welcome to the audience here in Carson City, those by video conference in Las Vegas, and those over the internet. Thank you for being patient with our start. Don't forget to silence your electronic devices. If you'd wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door. When you testify, please make sure you turn on the microphone and clearly state and spell your name for the record. There are hard copies of meeting materials available for members of the public as well as online. Public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting. Each person will be limited to 2 minutes, and you can still submit your written testimony to the committee up to 24 hours after the meeting. We expect courtesy and respect in our interactions, even if we don't agree with one another. So we thank you ahead of time for that. And we may be looking at our electronic devices for materials, so please do not be offended by that. We have two bills that we will hear in order today. So we will start by opening the hearing on Assembly Bill 585. The measure revises provisions relating to bill draft requests. And we have Speaker Yeager here today, an honorary member of Legislative Operations and Elections, as well as Mr. Killian. You don't forget, you have 15 minutes, and you may begin when you are ready.
Well, thank you, Chair Mosca, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Steve Yeager, representing Assembly District 9, which is in southwest Las Vegas. And as you noted, Mr. Killian is with me here at the table, and I'm sure, as he'll note, as you know, he's nonpartisan staff, so he doesn't have a position on the policy in the bill, but he, as the head of those who draft the bills, will be able to answer any sort of technical questions, I think, about how this bill would work. So I appreciate him being at the table with me. And I am pleased to present Assembly Bill 585 this afternoon, which revises provisions relating to bill draft requests. As you are aware, each legislative session, legislators and other entities may request the drafting of legislation for potential consideration by the legislature. These requests, commonly known as bill draft requests, or in this building, BDRs, are submitted to the Legal Division of the Legislative Counsel Bureau, whose staff works with the requesting party to draft the legislation with the appropriate details. Now, I know you all know this because you've requested your BDRs and you've gotten them drafted, but just so the record is clear, and I think you all know that state law actually prescribes the number of BDRs allocated to legislators and others who are authorized to submit BDRs, which includes legislative committees, the governor, constitutional officers, local government, and various other state agencies and entities. Assembly Bill 585 seeks to reduce the existing BDR allocations for legislators, constitutional officers, and the majority and minority leaders of both houses. Additionally, the bill revises the deadlines for the governor to submit the 5 BDRs proposing to implement his or her legislative agenda and establishes deadlines for such measures to be either pre-filed or introduced, depending on whether there is a gubernatorial election preceding the regular session. Now, Chair, I tread into these waters lightly because I know that talking about reducing BDRs always comes with some risk of rebellion, but I do think this is the right thing to do, to ensure that our staff has adequate time to draft bills and keep us on track during session. Sometimes we all need a little bit of extra motivation to get those details to legal so they can start drafting. And I will say I am as guilty of that as anybody. We all know there's a lot that happens between legislative sessions. We have interim committees and responsibilities. And then if you're in the assembly, you're running for re-election. Every interim, if you're in the Senate, every other interim you're running for re-election. But I believe if this bill passes, it will give us as legislators the push that we need to get our information to our bill drafters more promptly. Chair, I want to go through the sections of the bill rather quickly, and then we'll be happy to answer questions. So Section 1 reduces the number of BDRs that legislators may request prior to session from 9 to 6 for assembly members and from 18 to 12 for senators. Currently, as you all know, there are 2 deadlines in place for members to submit these pre-session bill draft requests. Assembly Bill 585 retains those deadlines of August 1st and December 1st preceding a regular session, but divides the new BDR allocations evenly between the 2 dates and adds a new stipulations for requests submitted during the period from August 2nd to December 1st. So Section 1 provides that a legislator may submit by December 1 a number of BDRs equal to the number of BDRs the legislator submitted by August 1st, for which sufficient detail was also submitted to allow for the complete drafting of the bill. So, for example, if an assembly member submits 3 BDRs before the August 1st deadline, the maximum allowable under this bill and provides details to allow LCB Legal Division to complete the drafting of these bills, then the assembly member is entitled to submit an additional 3 BDRs by December 1st. Now, if an assembly member only provides details for one of those BDRs, then the assembly member may only submit 1 additional BDR by December 1st. Additionally, that section provides that if a legislator withdraws one of their BDRs that they submitted before August 1, they can use that BDR towards their allocation of BDRs due by December 1st. So I know this is a little convoluted, but if you think about it, you get a set number, and that's 3 on August 1st. And if you want to get 3 more by December 1st, you either have to get your details into legal so they can start drafting, or you have to withdraw those requests. So no longer can we have a bunch of BDRs put in on August 1st and then just say, yeah, we'll get the details to you later, and here's 3 more BDRs on December 1st. And that, frankly, is the problem that some of us, including myself, suffer from, that we're not always good about getting those details. And then, Chair, Section 2 reduces the number of BDRs for the Speaker of the Assembly and the Majority Leader of the Senate. And those are the BDRs that we can submit between the date of the general election and the session. So that would go from 15 to 10, so there's a reduction of 5 BDRs for both the Speaker and Majority Leader. And then the Minority Leaders also have a reduction from 10 to 5 BDRs. Now, Section 3 specifies that the 5 BDRs that the governor may submit to propose his or her legislative agenda must be submitted to the legal division on or before August 1st preceding a regular session if there's not going to be a gubernatorial election that will be held before the session. So when a governor is midterm, and we know that governor is going to be back because he or she is not up for re-election, they have to get those in by August 1st. Now, if there's an election, it's an election year for the governor, the BDRs must be submitted after the first Monday in January, but not later than the first day of session. And we obviously want to do that because if you are a newly elected governor, or if you're running for re-election, you don't know if you're going to win until the election happens. So it's not really feasible to say you have to get those in by August 1st, and we wouldn't want to hamstring a brand-new governor and say, sorry, you missed the deadline, you don't get any BDRs. And I think, when you think about how we've functioned the last couple of sessions, I think, or especially this session, you sort of see why, because for those of you on the Ways and Means Committee, we're going to be hearing the governor's education bill tonight. And we didn't get that bill, I think, until about a week and a half ago, and it's a really, really large bill. So we're trying to accomplish a couple of things. We're trying to give legal enough time to draft the bill, but we're also trying to give legislators enough time to be able to thoughtfully consider legislation by moving that date up, because the later those bills come, the harder it is for us to engage in the process and do what we are tasked to do as legislators, which is to vet bills and come up with good policy. And just by way of reminder, that only applies in a non-election year for the governor. So that would have applied this session, but then next session, next cycle, the governor would have after the first Monday in January, but not later than the first day of session. And then finally, Section 3 also reduces by 1 the number of BDRs that the Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, State Treasurer, State Controller, and Attorney General may submit by September 1 preceding a regular session, and then reduces from 2 to 1 the number of BDRs the Secretary of State may submit by December 31st preceding a regular session. And then finally, Section 3 requires the BDRs proposing the governor's legislative agenda to be pre-filed on or before the 10th calendar day preceding a regular session. If no gubernatorial election will be held before the next session begins. If there is an election, that would be introduced on or before the 15th day of session. So again, in a non-election year, we're just trying to get those bills earlier, and also in election years, we're trying to get those bills earlier because pre-filing by the 15th day of session would mean that we'd have 105 days to consider those bills, rather than the situation we're in right now with a couple of them where we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 days, 20 days to consider them. So Chair Mosca, members of the committee, that generally concludes my presentation, but I do want to note, I do want to answer one question I think I might get, and I think that question is, well, how many fewer BDRs would this bill result in? And to do that, you have to do a little bit of math and make some assumptions. For sure, it will result in 18 fewer BDRs. That's just by the definition of the bill, by the reduction in the leadership, and by the reduction in the constitutional officers. How many fewer BDRs it would mean for legislators depends whether the legislator is an incumbent or a first-time elected. But I can give you a range. If this bill were to pass, we would see somewhere in the range of 186 to 270 fewer BDRs that's in an aggregate that come from legislators and constitutional officers. So it would depend a little bit on the makeup of the body, but if all of us were to be defeated in our next election and we had 42 members, then it would be on the low side of that number. But hopefully that will answer that question. And Chair, with that, I want to thank you for your time and consideration of this bill. And Mr. Killian and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We do have a few questions, so we will start with Majority Leader Hedeke.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Speaker, for bringing this bill. I've always been a fan of this bill. When I chaired this committee in 2019, then Assembly Member Dr. Titus brought the bill, and unfortunately, we couldn't get it across the finish line. And then I think it was last session or the session before, but Assembly Member MacArthur brought the bill. And so I'm happy to see this bill brought forward. I've always been a big fan of the policy, and I'm hopeful we can get it across the finish line this time. I do have a question, Chair, but my question is for legal, for Mr. Killian. Could you talk to us, or would you be able to explain to the committee what this would mean for your ability to draft bills and how this would impact your division in drafting bills and in your ability to get bills out and amendments out? So that would be helpful, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel, through you to the member. The biggest change that we made going into this session from previous sessions is to try to use as much of the time as possible before the session starts to get drafting done. It probably comes as no surprise that drafting during session is the most difficult and inefficient kind of drafting for us to do. When our attorneys are in committee, when we're answering questions, when we're handling all of the operations of the legislature itself, and when the members are here all day, we don't have a lot of time available during the day to draft, so our drafting typically gets pushed off into the night and gets compressed among all the other activities. This session, we were able to actually keep committee councils in committee for the entire session, which is the first time we've been able to do that. What enabled us to get there was using as much time as possible before session to draft. The complication is, if we have the request but we don't have the details, then that limits the number of bills that we can actually draft before session. So probably the most impactful changes in this bill for the operations of the legal division would be the requirement for details to be submitted at the risk of potentially losing BDRs, because that means we will have more of those details and be able to do more of that drafting before session. And also the change of the timeline for the governor's legislative agenda BDRs. Those tend to be very large, policy-dense pieces of legislation. They're currently not due until the 19th day of session. Giving us those extra 6 months to draft starting on August 1st would make a huge difference, so that we're potentially drafting 1,000 pages of bill before session as opposed to right in the heart of session. So those are the ways this bill would help our operations the most. We want to shift as much drafting as possible outside of the time of session, and this bill would help us to do significantly more of that drafting before we're tied up with session obligations.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblymember Cole.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is, as it relates to notification from LCB that you don't have enough detail, right? Because sometimes we won't know that we've not provided you everything that you need to properly draft this. So will there be, a requirement that within, say, a month of me submitting something, you tell me it's not sufficient, and then maybe a couple of mornings, like at the 5-yard line, 10-yard line kind of thing, that you're gonna lose your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Council. Absolutely. We have not really had enforceable details deadlines in the past, so you would get me reaching out to you to harangue you, even though I didn't necessarily have any teeth behind that. With this requirement as an option, we would absolutely be reaching out to you both when you initially submit the request to let you know whether what you've submitted is already draftable, so you know you're good for that next allotment, or periodically throughout that time period between August 1st and December 10th to let you know what's still outstanding, what we still need details on. Ideally, it was my goal this time to make sure every member had at least one measure back before the election, fully drafted and ready to pre-file. That will continue to be our practice, to have as many of those initial 3 back to you and ready before the election to pre-file as possible. So you'll definitely know whether we have the details, and ideally, by whether you have a bill back or not, whether the bills are actually in position to be drafted or not. But we will absolutely be in contact with you on that.
And are you willing to put that into statute?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Council. I would be fine with that. However, that's kind of a policy question that's more up to the sponsor of the bill and to this body to address.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblymember Dickman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this bill, except for the deadlines, but I've always been supportive of getting rid of bills, but my question is, and maybe I'm missing it in the bill, but the February bill that we get, would that still be there or no?
Steve Yeager for the record. Yeah, so that stays the same. So the one that you have after session begins, we didn't make any changes. I think it's one for us and 2 for the Senate. So we were very mindful that I think that's really an important one, because usually you have that like last minute idea that you didn't put in. So that would stay absolutely the same. It's just the ones that happen prior to the election. And obviously, if you're a newly elected, it's that December 10th deadline, and if you are an incumbent, then it's the August and December deadlines. And I understand about your consternation about the drafting, and to Assemblymember Cole's question, I don't know how many emails Mr. Killian sent me over the cycle saying, by the way, you have your BDRs in and we are not able to draft them. And to his point, there's not really enforcement behind that, right? So I think we act accordingly, because you say, yeah, I'll get to that when I get to it. And I think for us, it's just trying to put that at the top of your list, that you really do have to get to that. And honestly, I think it makes for a better legislative process, because the more bills that we can have filed at the beginning of session, the fewer presentations you have to have in committee the first 2 weeks of session. You can start hearing bills right away. People can start engaging in those bills, and no bill is perfect, but I think if we can shift some of that work to before session, maybe it doesn't feel so hectic at this time of session when we're 12 days out from the end. So I understand that, but I think we need something in there to get us to actually take notice of that. Or, if you're just not ready to go forward, you'd have the option to withdraw that BDR, and then you'd get another BDR. So essentially you could, you could put in that BDR a second time if you were willing to withdraw the first one. So we wanted to leave that option out there as well.
Just quick, many of my BDRs were constituent ideas, and it's kind of hard to get them in line for that deadline, but anyway, thank you, and thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Next, we'll go back to Majority Leader Headege.
Thank you. And it's not a question, it's just more of a comment. I think this was the first legislative session where I've been here where we've seen this many number of bills be drafted before the legislative session. So when we began this legislative session, we started with a historic number of bills that we were ready to hear. And I want to thank you and your division for that, because it made managing the legislative session much easier for the speaker and I. Half the reason that we didn't have to be here late on deadline days and didn't have to waive rules was because you were able to get the amount of bills out in a timely manner. And so thank you for that. And I'm hoping that that's the case for future sessions. And I know that this policy will allow us to achieve that, so that we're not here at 11 or 12 o'clock at midnight introducing bills or voting on bills, but we're doing it between, the hours of 8 to 5. So thank you so much, Mr. Killian, for your work, and thank your division for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Council. I just want to say I very much appreciate those comments. The division has been watching and hearing those comments as you've been expressing them on the floor of the Assembly throughout the session, and it's made a difference. Morale is very much up. I have an incredible staff of attorneys, and all of the credit goes to them and the work they've done to enable us to meet these kinds of deadlines so that you can move legislative business more efficiently. I am incredibly proud of the staff we have, and they work very hard, very long hours, and we could not do this without them.
And we echo that gratitude. Next, we'll go to Assemblymember Edgeworth.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start, thank you very much for doing this. I'm all for this being a more efficient process, whatever that looks like, I guess. I'm new. Also, I'm not a math major, but it looks like the majority leader would lose 33% of their extra bills, and the minority leader would lose 50% of their extra bills. And I'm sure that these aren't arbitrary numbers. Can you tell me a little bit about, was this based on what other states are doing or how you came to these numbers?
Steve Yeager, for the record. It's not based on other states, just because other states kind of are all over the map. And I'll tell you, it's not an exact science either. Essentially, I just looked at, 15 seems like more. I think the last two sessions, I don't believe I put in even 10, and I did do some historical analysis, and I don't think the majority's ever used 15, or the minority's ever used 10, so I really just said, why don't we just cut 5 off of each of those? But, if there's a better number, I think that's appropriate as well. Those tend not to get used. But if they're not gonna get used, I think maybe we just shouldn't have that many, right? Because sometimes the incentive, at least for me, when I heard, I get 15 more bills, so then it was like, well, can I try to find 15 more things? And I don't know that that's necessarily the motivation that we wanna give to legislators, is to find like 15 more ideas, some of which aren't well thought out, some of which are really difficult to draft. So that was really an arbitrary number to say, why don't we just subtract 5 from everybody?
Great, thank you.
Thank you, and I'll ask the last question. Is actually similar, I think, for Mr. Killian. Do we find that most legislators don't use all of their BDRs anyways?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Council. There are a significant number that go unused. I want to say it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15% that simply didn't get requested this time. The number of withdrawn doesn't necessarily match the number that are unused, because in addition to those that don't get requested in the first place, there are a substantial number, well in excess of half, that go in initially as placeholders. And then some of those placeholders just never gain details. So there's an additional probably 10 to 15% that began their life as placeholders and simply never got fleshed out. So there's a significant number of slack in the existing number of BDRs.
Well, thank you for that. I'm going to go back to Majority Leader Hedeke.
I just have one more question, because I'm not sure if you have these numbers, but how many bills in total get introduced roughly, and how many bills pass roughly? If I recall, it's half.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Council, through you to the member. Thank you, Chair. In a typical session, we will get between 1,200 to 1,500 BDRs. We will get somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 to 1,200 bills actually introduced. And then typically the cutoff is somewhere between 60 to 70% of bills that get enacted, and then somewhere between 50 and 60% of the total number of bills that ultimately get signed by the governor and become law. So there's an attrition rate of somewhere between 30 to 40% that's fairly consistent between sessions for how many bills get introduced versus how many bills then ultimately become law.
Thank you. We'll actually go next to Assemblymember Miller.
Thank you, Chair, and nice to see you down there, Mr. Killian. With that, the question is, as the majority leader had stated, this bill's been brought multiple times, right? And we had a member a few sessions ago who had actually calculated the cost of every single BDR from once it's submitted to the end, making it through both houses. But we know that not all bills make it through both houses, and sometimes members submit bills and then don't even go forward with them, right? The bill's written and legal has done all this work, and then it gets to the time we're supposed to drop it on the floor, and it's like, nah, I changed my mind, not gonna go ahead. So do you have numbers of either the financial cost for each BDR or the financial savings that we could possibly as a state experience based on this legislation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. So I don't have those numbers with me, but I'll be happy to generate them for you. I can say in the interest of that question, there is a significant amount of overtime that your staff work to draft legislation. It is not cost-free. Every piece of legislation does come with a cost in the form of staff overtime. With some of the changes we made this session to extend that drafting over the interim to the greatest extent possible, we've been able to create overtime savings. I can run the numbers and get a sense of kind of what the average number of hours worked on a bill is, to get a sense of what the average amount of savings per bill would be. Even without reducing the number of BDRs, though, the more of that drafting we can stretch out into the period of the interim before the session, the less overtime we have to work. It's the drafting during session that generates the most overtime per bill. So there definitely would be a significant amount of savings associated with these changes, and I can do a little bit of work to put some numbers together for you to give you a sense of what that might look like.
Thank you. It would just be a little bit of work, though, not a lot of work, right?
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'll invite you to sit back as we start testimony. We will start in Carson City for support of Assembly Bill 585. Don't forget to state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes, and make sure our remarks are to the bill and not to the bill's sponsor. You may begin when you are ready.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair Mosca and committee. My name is Joshua Skaggs, and I am the Legislative Affairs Director for the Nevada Republican Party, here today in support to AB 585. Our party platform states that we support lower taxes and fees and a reduction in the scope of government at all levels. We believe AB 585 can lead to a reduction in the scope of government at the state level. AB 585 could enhance efficiency in the legislative process by reducing excessive bill draft requests, ensuring lawmakers focus on well-developed proposals rather than overwhelming the system with unnecessary, duplicative, and potentially meaningless showboating legislation. By imposing stricter deadlines and limiting the number of requests, the bill promotes accountability and streamlines government operations, aligning with our party's commitment to reducing bureaucracy and unnecessary expenditure. We would also like to thank Minority Leader Robin Titus for introducing a similar bill, SB 109, which is quite similar to AB 585, as both bills focus on reducing the number of legislative measures that can be requested and streamlining the legislative process. Thank you very much for this incredible piece of legislation, and please support AB 585. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Lynn Chapman, and I'm the State Vice President of Nevada Families for Freedom. And I have some very interesting information. Bill Kramer wrote an article December of 2024, and he was talking about bills. And he said, by our count, lawmakers across 50 states introduced 246,405 bills over the 23-24 legislative sessions, with numbers increasing every year. Think about it, that's over 250,000 bills in 1 year. New York is the one that has the most bills, and Alaska the least bills, but it's interesting that California now has capped the amount of bills that they are introducing every year. I've been here since 1987, every session, but doing only a few bills at first, but now there's so many bills. And I've supported this type of bill each and every time it's come up. So hallelujah, I'm really excited to see it's back up again. And what we really need to do, I can remember we've had many times we've had bills, maybe 6 or 7 bills on the same subject matter, trying to achieve the same thing, but we have all these different hearings and all these different bills. Why can't they combine? People work together. We can combine some of these things and maybe have 2 bills instead of 6. That sure would help. And we would love to have you have time to be able to do more research, lots of debate, amending bills, and potentially this would lead to having better bills because we'd have the time to do it. And so please support this bill. Thank you.
Well, we didn't know we'd be back in here, did we? Janine Hansen, State Chairman of the Independent American Party. This is a wonderful idea, and we're so thankful for it. We've always supported all the bills by MacArthur and Titus that have been here before, and we support this. We're glad that the speaker has presented it. We're always glad when we can have the occasion to support something he's doing. And we think this saves time, it saves money, it saves legislators, it saves staff, it saves taxpayers, and it saves citizens. So we're really happy to have this. We think it's a great idea. I was here so long ago that I remember before the 120-day sessions, and one year we were here well into June, and I was trying to be at Tahoe during that time, driving down. So sometimes there's a big adjustment as things change and we learn new things. And I think this is one of the things we need to recognize, that we can have fewer bills, they can be improved in quality, we have more time to consider them. And I just think it's a great idea, so thank you very much. We support it.
Thank you, Chairman Mosca. My name is Scott Johnston. I'm a citizen lobbyist. I first came into this session, a previous session, and was pretty well overwhelmed with all the bills. And so I jumped in with both feet this year. And I'm also a part of the Washoe GOP Legislative Committee, which we have probably 15 to 20 people working tirelessly, reviewing bills, seeing what's passed, what's going forward. It's a huge job, so I can't imagine what it is for you. But I definitely support this bill in getting better bills, fewer bills, and making all the meetings and all of our jobs, especially the citizen lobbyists, for us to be able to go on to Nellis, look at all the bills, come down here and meet with you guys and give our opinions on what's happening with them. So I think this is a great move, and I don't know why it's taken so long to get this passed. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Maurice Washington. I am representing myself, not AFP this time. I think this is a great piece of legislation. Kudos to the Speaker. I am probably one of those old relics that worked on the other side of the 120 days. And the session that Janine mentioned that went way into June, I was part of that session. We went through the changes of going through 120 days, trying to meet the timelines and the bill drafts and working with interim committees to where we are today. And I think reducing the number of BDRs that are requested not only makes your job better, makes the LCB, which I give kudos to LCB. We have the best staff in all the world. They do a yeoman's job for the amount of work that they have to do. And I just applaud them. And I'm requesting that you support this bill, reduce the numbers, because on this side, it's even more difficult. So thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair Mosca. My name is Kathleen Seline, S-E-L-I-N-E. I just want to say that I am in support of this bill, and I was there in 1997 too. I was an intern here. And I remember that it was a 169-day session, and the following year they changed it to 120 days, which is good, gets it done faster, but then it piles in all of the bills, and it's kind of a little overwhelming. For the LCB, I think it's a lot of work. For you legislators, it's a lot of work. For the citizen lobbyists and the paid lobbyists and everyone, and I am in strong support of this bill. That's it.
Good afternoon. I think this is on, yes. Good afternoon. My name is Aisha Goins, A-E-S-H-A-G-O-I-N-S. I'm here as a citizen. And I just want to thank Speaker for bringing this bill. I think it's so important. I haven't been in this building that long, but I remember the first time MacArthur brought this and I watched it, and I remember saying to myself, he has a point. This is crazy. And when it was his last session, and I met him in the side, and I said, if this bill ever comes again, I'm going to make it a point to stand up and say, you are right. So on his behalf, I also just agree, this is tough, right? And I can't imagine what it is for all of you. And I appreciate your service. And I appreciate the communities at large who also show up. But collaboration is key. And I think if we collaborated more, it wouldn't be so overwhelming. And I think minimizing the bills makes us have to collaborate. And I think that's important for the state, because then we get more constituent voice, we get more community voices heard. And I think that's really the point. Having bills and being disruptive with each other, that's not how we get real work done. It's not how we get real change. And I do this work because I believe in the change. And so I'm urging you to please pass this time. Thank you for your service. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Seeing no others here in Las Vegas, in Carson City, and seeing no one in Las Vegas, I will read out the phone line before we get to the phone, just in case. So if you are going to testimony and support the phone, please call 888-475-4499, and the meeting ID is 834-2976-5250. So AVH, when you're ready, if you could please open up the phone lines in support for AB 585.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 585, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Hi, this is Yolanda Canuck, Yolanda, last name Knaak. I'm calling on behalf of myself, and I'm asking you to please support this bill. It would streamline the process so much, and I think it would really take a lot of stress off of the legislators and also the lobbyists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, AVH. Next caller.
Chair, we have no additional callers in support at this time.
Thank you. And with that, we will open up testimony in opposition to AB 585. If anyone is here in Carson City for opposition. Seeing no one come to the table and still seeing no one in Las Vegas, AVH will open up the phone lines for opposition to AB 585.
The public line is open and working. We have no callers for opposition.
Thank you so much. And with that, we will move to neutral. Anyone neutral here? Seeing no one in Las Vegas and the phone lines. Anyone in neutral?
Chair, the line is open and working. We have no callers for neutral.
Okay, and with that, I will invite the speaker to come back for any closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Steve Yeager for the record. Appreciate those who testified in support. That's not the normal crowd that testifies in support of my bills in this committee, so that was nice. Just a couple quick points. You may be curious, there are other BDRs that exist out in the world that don't live in statute. So under our joint standing rules that we have with the Assembly and the Senate, Joint Standing Rule 14.4 gives additional bills to the Speaker, to the Majority Leader, and to the minority parties. So we can't change that here in statute, but I am committed to reducing those number of BDRs as well, because if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in the neighborhood of 150-ish BDRs live in Joint Standing Rule 14.4. And, you know, obviously that's a conversation I'd have to have if I'm lucky enough to be in this position next session. I'd have to have with the Senate Majority Leader. But I think that's the way that we could further reduce those bills. And so those are both the traditional Joint Standing Rule 14 BDRs that come in as committee bills, and they include the emergency bills that the four legislative leaders have towards the end of session. So just know that I see this as the step that we can take in statute, but there are other things that we can do as legislators when we adopt the rules to try to further limit BDRs, and I'm committed to doing that. And then, Chair, the final thing I wanted to say was just to echo some of the comments. One of the real privileges of being the Speaker is I get to work all the time with our staff, and you know, when I was newly elected, I just would sort of make requests and things would just happen and you go on with your day. But I've had a real privilege to interact with all the different divisions of the LCB and see the great work that they do. And obviously, you know, legal does a lot of work for us in drafting the bills. So I wanted to just take a moment here as we get towards the end of session to thank everybody who works for the LCB and makes this building operate, and frankly makes us look good, because they do so much work behind the scenes that's just not seen. And I wanted to let them know, if they're happen to be listening to this hearing, just how much we appreciate them. So thank you for the time this afternoon, Chair. I appreciate it, and I urge your support of Assembly Bill 585.
Thank you so much. And with that, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 585, and I will turn the gavel over to our Vice Chair.
Thank you so much, Chair. We will give you a few minutes to get down there. When you're ready, we'll open the hearing on Assembly Bill 588. This measure revises provisions relating, apologies, wrong bill. 1 second. It is, sorry. Revises provisions relating to members of the Assembly in the Nevada Legislature. Your hearing's open. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gonzalez and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Erica Mosca, proudly representing Assembly District 14 in East Las Vegas. I'm pleased to present Assembly Bill 588 before you today, which revises the title of a member of the Assembly to Assembly Member throughout the Nevada Revised Statutes. So some background, as you know, the Assembly Standing Rules and Joint Standing Rules of the Senate and Assembly changed the title of a member of the Nevada Assembly to Assembly Member, regardless of the member's gender. Consistent with the rules of the 83rd Legislature, Assembly Bill 588 revises references to the title of a member of the Assembly throughout NRS. So we're able to change that in our rules. However, in NRS, there is another place where it exists, and that's what this bill is. So Assembly Bill 588 largely makes technical changes to replace Assemblywoman and Assemblyman with Assembly Member, but I'd like to highlight two sections of the bill that contain more substantive changes. So in Section 1, it eliminates the authority of a female member of the Assembly to have Assemblywoman precede her name on the official stationery and business cards. Additionally, on Section 13, requires the Department of Motor Vehicles to furnish to each Assembly member a special license plate that says State Assembly Member, along with the designated number showing the seniority of that member. And finally, Section 16 of the bill clarifies that the change to such specialty license plates will not take effect until after the 2026 general election to avoid the license plates having to be refurnished now and avoid a cost to the state. So with that, Vice Chair Gonzalez and members of the committee, that concludes my remarks, and I thank you for considering and will take questions.
Thank you so much, Chair. Members, any questions? We're going to go to Assemblymember Hibbets and then Assemblymember Danielle Monroe-Morendo. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Chair. I think that's on. So I did a little bit of research into this, and I'm sorry, while I'm talking, I'm trying to pull something up as for a possible second question, if I'm allowed. So I did some research into this, and it is my understanding that the People's Republic of California allows their representatives to choose Assemblyman, Assemblywoman, or Assembly Member. Why should I give up my choice for my title?
Thank you, Assemblymember Hibbets. I think that's a great question. I think when I think about that question, this bill here just makes conforming changes in NRS to what was already changed in the joint standing rules. And so even if, to me, that is, for me, personally, I like the change because I think it can ensure that we have some government efficiency when we are having items in the legislature. But the importance of this bill is it is already changed in the joint standing rules, so this just ensures that the things in NRS that is impacted by it is the same.
Danielle?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you, Madam Chair, for bringing this piece of legislation. I think it was my freshman session in this building way back in 2016. I had a bill that had a number of women legislators on the bill, and because one man added his name as a co-sponsor on the bill, we all went from Assembly women on the bill to Assembly man because of that one man. And we started the conversation then that we're all Assembly members, So why shouldn't we all just be assembly members? In the Senate, when a bill comes out, it's senator. It doesn't matter the gender of the member. They're all senators. So I appreciate you putting in this piece of legislation so that we're all considered equal as assembly members, and that no man in this building outweighs any woman that's also doing the same work in this building.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? We'll go to Assembly Member Dickman, and then we'll go to Assembly Member Howdicke.
Thank you. And actually, it's probably not much of a question, but when Patty Cafferata served in this body, she told me they were referred to as Madam Assemblyman. What's wrong with that?
Thank you. Assemblymember Howdicke.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Chair, for doing the work and presenting the bill. And just to confirm, it is my understanding that this bill was brought just to put us in, again, in compliance with our joint standing rules that we passed at the beginning of session. So this isn't changing anything. We are just now going to be in compliance with our standing rules that we voted on the first day of session, which I believe is AR1.
Erica Moss, for the record, yes, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Assemblymember Hibbets, did you have another question? Sure.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a technical question. I know that in Section 16 that the issuance of new license plates won't happen until after the 26th election. However, that'll still be within the current biennium that we are discussing now, and I'm just wondering, with DMV loving to put fiscal notes on everything under the sun, even bills they have nothing to do with, how we got away without any kind of a note. And I apologize because I know this isn't Ways and Means, but if there's no fiscal note, we're not going to Ways and Means, so I'd like to just ask that.
Yes, Erica Moss, for the record, just because I see you in Ways and Means and many people in this committee a lot. So, yes, we put specifically that it would not start until after the 2026 general election, which should avoid the fiscal note. But if we could go to legal, Vice Chair?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Committee Counsel. Our understanding and drafting of this, based on conversations with DMV, is that it's part of their routine process at that point after the general election to issue these plates anyway, because members get reelected or don't get reelected, and so there's a general issuance of these plates at that time regardless. And so by pushing off the change to assembly member to the time when they would already be reprinting the plates, that would eliminate the cost, as opposed to if they had to print them one additional time before they ordinarily reprint them, that would create the cost.
Thank you. Thank you. And I also think that brings a great point about being efficient and having to separate the two license plates. Now everybody just gets one. So I do really appreciate the bill. Any final comments? No? All right. We will move into support testimony. Seeing none in Carson City, we'll go down to Las Vegas. Seeing none in Las Vegas, we'll now go to AVH. AVH, can you please open the lines for support testimony on Assembly Bill 588?
Thank you, Chair. The line is open and working. We have no callers for support at this time.
Thank you so much. We will now move to testimony in opposition. If anybody would like to oppose Assembly Bill 588, please come forward.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and Committee. My name is Joshua Skaggs, and I am the Legislative Affairs Director for the Nevada Republican Party, here today in opposition to AB 588. AB 588 unnecessarily alters historical traditional titles and erases gender distinctions that are important to men and women. Gender titles are not inherently outdated. They are a sign of respect for women who have fought hard to achieve equality with men. We find it ironic that Nevada has the honor and distinction of being the female majority legislature while simultaneously seeking to erase women. Several legislators of both genders spoke out against this change when it was implemented by rule at the beginning of the session because they understood that the change was demeaning to women. AB 588 appears to be politically motivated gender ideology activism and distracts from more pressing legislative priorities such as economic issues and education reform. Please vote no on AB 588. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Janine Hansen. I'm the state chairman of the Independent American Party. I really appreciated what Assemblyman Hibbett said. I think it's important for people to be able to recognize, be identified in the way that they would like to be identified. I think it's very important, especially for women who have fought so long to be recognized and to have recognition in these ways. And I think that this demeans that opportunity. And in our party, we recognize two genders. And so we oppose the bill. And we appreciate, but I want to say how much I've appreciated the chair of the committee because she's always been so fair. So it has nothing to do with her. And I appreciate her very much. But we do oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Seeing no others, we'll move down to Las Vegas. Seeing no one in Las Vegas, we will turn to the phone lines. AV8, can you please open the phone lines for opposition to AB 588, please?
If you would like to testify in opposition of AB 588, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Committee. My name is Jim DeGraffenreid, JIMDEGRAFFENREID. I'm Nevada's Republican National Committeeman, here today in opposition to AB 588. I agree with the testimony that was given previously. One additional thing I wanted to mention is that it was pointed out that this brings NRS into compliance with the standing rules that were passed at the beginning of the session. It seems like that should be the other way around, and standing rules should comply with state law. And also, it seems like locking this change into NRS would make it harder to make a correction later on. Thank you.
Thank you. AVH, next caller, please.
Chair, we have no additional callers in opposition.
Thank you so much. I will now invite Chair Mosca back up to make closing remarks. Oh, I forgot neutral. We will now go to neutral testimony. Is there anybody here in Carson City that would like to make neutral testimony on Assembly Bill 588? Seeing none, we will move to Las Vegas. Seeing no one in Las Vegas, we will now move to the phone lines. AVH, is there anyone in neutral that would like to testify on Assembly Bill 588?
Thank you. The line is open and working. We have no callers for neutral.
Thank you so much, Chair. Would you like to make, okay, so we are waiving closing remarks, and Chair, I will hand it back over to Chair Mosca. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have actually two more things before we end today. Members, please note that the Speaker has waived Rule 57-4 of the Assembly Standing Rules to allow committees to take final action on bills within 24 hours after they were heard. So it's my intention today to work session the bills we just heard, Assembly Bill 585 and Assembly Bill 588. So at this time, I will now open the work session on Assembly Bill 585. We just heard this. The measure is sponsored by the committee and revises provisions relating to bill draft requests and was presented by Speaker Yeager. Members, are there any questions? At this time, I'll entertain a motion to do pass AB 585.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion from Vice Chair Gonzalez and a second from Assemblymember Hadegui. Is any discussion on the motion? Assemblymember Hibbets?
Thank you, Chair. And while I support the intent of 585, and I think that the reduction in BDRs would bring better legislation, I cannot support this as it does not reduce the number of BDRs allotted to the unelected bureaucrats and only reduces the BDRs allotted to the elected representatives of the people of this state. So for that reason, I will be a no.
Thank you. Assemblymember Cole?
Thank you, Chair. I, like my colleague, will be a no on this. For me, I'm concerned with limiting elected lawmakers' ability to make laws, especially considering that this bill is going to further reduce the ability for the minority party to actually partake in the lawmaking process. I do support the deadlines on getting details to LCB and support requiring more bills to be pre-filed if that could be added in and amended. And to some of the people's points about collaborating with others, there are very strict confidentiality rules around BDRs. And so we don't know what anybody else is doing until those bills are introduced. So that makes it difficult. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Assemblymember Dickman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to be a yes but reserve, because I do like the idea of reducing the number of bills, but I kind of tend to agree with Assemblyman Hibbets a bit. So I will be a yes right now. I may change to a no. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. And if the nays could please raise their hand, Assemblymember Hidbits, Assemblymember Cole, and Assemblymember Edgeworth. Thank you. The motion carries, and I'll assign the floor statement to Assemblymember Nadeem. Thank you. So the next measure for consideration is Assembly Bill 588. This measure is sponsored by the Assembly Committee on Legislative Operations and revises provisions relating to members of the Assembly of the Nevada Legislature, which I just presented. Members, are there any questions? I will entertain a motion to do pass AB 588.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion from Vice Chair Gonzalez and a second from Assemblymember Hadigi. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Nay. We have nays from Assemblymember Hibbets, Cole, Edgeworth, and Dickman. The motion carries. I'll assign the floor statement to Assemblymember Moore. Thank you. Thank you. I will now close the work session. Thank you. So our last item of business is public comment. Each person has 2 minutes to provide testimony on anything within legislative operations and elections which was not heard today. Remind you of the call-in number was 888-475-4499, and the meeting ID is 834-2976-5250. With that, we'll start here in Carson City. Seeing no one for public comment, we'll go down to Las Vegas. Still seeing none in Las Vegas. ABH will open up the phone line for public comment, please.
Chair, the line is open and working. We have no callers for public comment.
Okay, thank you. We're still not sure if this is the last meeting or not. We'll say we appreciate everyone, and seeing no further business.
Sorry, I have something to say.
Okay, sorry, Vice Chair Gonzalez.
Sorry, thank you so much. So because we don't know if this is our last meeting or not, we wanted to give you our committee gift. Since it's probably the last time we'll be in this room together. So it wasn't ready in time for our party last week. So this is just a thank you from the committee, and congratulations on sharing for the first time. So thank you.
Yay. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it, committee members. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting but open this. Thank you.